That it is now recording. Again, pitch perfect, creating your confident pitch. My name is Angela McDonald. I am a career coach and a corporate trainer. I started my career out in finance, and I also had my own global export business. I've hired and trained people in America, Australia, China, and Singapore. And I now work as a career coach, and I work in leadership development and a lot of presentation skills, corporate training. In today's agenda, we want to talk about, we're going to start by looking at this from a very broad view and look at a personal value proposition. And what is a personal value proposition? Why do you need it? And how do you write it? Then we want to take this personal value proposition and start scaling it down to say, how can I use this as a framework for my elevator pitch and to craft that answer to tell me about yourself? Has anyone found themselves in a situation where someone says, what do you do? Or tell me about yourself, and you just freeze and you come out all jumbly and it doesn't come out as confident as you want it to sound? I know I've been there. And especially if you've changed your career a lot, if you've moved around a lot, it gets a little more complicated. So having a very concise, compelling message is really important, and it's why it's important to create your PVP and use that as the foundation for an elevator pitch, for tell me about yourself, for a cover letter. When you have a really strong, confident message, you can project yourself in the image that you want to give others. So today, to give you a little overview, we're going to work on, I'm going to give you some techniques and some tools on how to write this, how to create it. Then we might have time for a little bit of practice today for those of you who want to try out a little bit of the framework. But more importantly, next week, we're going to have an interview workshop where we're really going to focus on these initial questions. So I'd love for you to join us for part 2 of this. If you can't do both parts, that's okay. At least we can to get you in and you can practice it on your own. So think about those questions. What do you do? Tell me about yourself. What do you want to do? Walk me through your resume. These are typically the first questions you get when you sit down to an interview. They're also the questions that can make or break that interview in about the first 90 seconds you're sitting there. I was talking to someone recently who is an executive with a very large US company who said they are now rejecting more people at the phone interview stage than ever before. And I found that so interesting to be like, what was the reason? Why do they think that is? One, they think it's because a lot of people aren't used to talking on the phone anymore. So they don't have the strong phone communication skills that maybe someone from my generation, when I was up half the beginning of my life talking on the phone all the time. There was no texting, so it was a lot of phone conversations. So one reason is people don't have the strong phone skills that earlier generations might have had. The next reason is, they think, is because people aren't practicing and creating some of those fundamental introductory answers to those questions. So if you think about it, another statistic I've heard is that most phone interviews, the person interviewing decides in the first 90 seconds if they want to keep talking to you. So think about that. You've thought about, how am I going to talk about my programming skills? How am I going to talk about the work I've done? But you're not going to get to that stage of the interview if you don't make the first 90 seconds. So that's why this is so important, to prepare and get yourself ready to start that interview. You can set the tone for where the conversation is going to go. So first, let's take a little poll. Now that we've thought a little bit about these questions, how would you describe your answer to these questions? Remember, things like, what do you do? Tell me about yourself. What do you want to do? Walk me through your resume. I'm going to put a poll up, and I want you to tell me. You will see the question come up in just a second. And I'd like to hear everyone. Oh, my poll is not working today. It doesn't want to come up. So what we will do is we are just going to do it in the chat room. I'm going to go back to my presentation. Let's get a 1, 2, or a 3. How would you describe your answer to these questions? 5 stars, it's so amazing, super confident, I feel awesome. Or you're like, it's okay, could use some work. Or, help me. 1, 2, or 3, type in the chat. We've got 3, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. How do you feel about it? A lot of 2s. A lot of people think, yeah, it's pretty okay. Several people got the 3s in there thinking, yep, I need some help. Totally understandable. So thank you for that input. Next time I'll have my fancy poll working so we can use my technology. I will remind you that the career coaches do not have the technical backgrounds that all of you do. So that's how we run into our technical issues sometimes. So good. I think that having a personal value proposition and preparing is so important. And personally, just from my own story, I've moved around a bit with my family. And every place I've moved, I've kind of had to tell my story again and figure out what I'm going to do next, figure out where I'm taking my business. And I really learned that I really had to write out my story, figure out how it was I was going to best deliver my message. And if anything, you figure out how you're going to package yourself up and hand yourself to that employer. And don't make someone else connect the dots or try to figure you out. I know for me, especially I lived in Asia for 16 years, coming back to the middle of America. I told people I lived in China for 11 years and Singapore for 3 and Australia for a few. They could have just thought I was, a little out there, didn't understand me, couldn't figure out what I did. So I really had to put that package together to make sure they understood who I was. Do we have anyone calling in from China or Singapore, Australia, any of my former homes? Please type in if you are calling from one of these. I'd love to know if you were there from China, Singapore, or Australia. Anyway, back on. What is a personal value proposition? What exactly is it that we're talking about? It's a confident message that describes your strengths and aspirations. And it's essentially the foundation for your personal marketing pitch. So think about that. Again, every company has its value proposition, right? They have their mission, their vision, what they want to deliver to their clients. And this is essentially your own personal value proposition. What can you offer that company? What can you give them? What's your mission? What are your goals? So I'd like to know, now that you think a little bit more about that, why do you think you need a personal value proposition? And some people's reasons might be a little different than others. But right now, what do you think it is? Why do you need it? And feel free, if you can't type in, if you want to unmute yourself, we're not a huge group today, so feel free to unmute yourself and let us know what you think. Why do you think you need it? Again, I said in my case, I needed it because I had done a lot of different work and I needed to really make that a little more concise to be able to deliver my message. Tamay says elevator pitches at networking events and career fairs. Absolutely. Great for networking. Someone says she doesn't think she succinctly presents that information. I think that's really, really common. I think that a lot of us think, of course I can introduce myself. But I'll tell you what, I start every coaching session with, tell me a little bit about yourself. And it's, and I'm not saying everyone has to be super prepared even for a coaching session, but I realize how often people are caught off guard and they might say, yeah, I'm a programmer and I'm taking a Udacity course. Like that tells me nothing, right? That tells me this much about the person. I want to know, I want a picture. Someone says to become memorable. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Brett. To be able to tell your story in a way that makes an impact. Absolutely, Leonie. Layla, I'd like my LinkedIn summary to be a little better and for my website. Very good. Again, these are great things as you create this PVP, the places you can use that as a foundation. Julie, to remain focused and avoid rambling or going off topic, for sure. And I think that it's so important, especially in an interview, that when you get your personal value proposition, and then you position it and create it for exactly that company, and you've tweaked it a little bit so they're getting the exact message and focusing on the strengths you want them to hear, then you're going to feel a lot more confident and a lot more convincing, and hopefully avoid the rambling. I know I can do that as well. Someone says, I liked that one and I just went a little too far. My value add in a company is broad and ambiguous, and I need focus and brevity. Very good. A lot of times we're in a lot of different places. We've got a lot of different pieces of the puzzle we touch, right? And we have to kind of say, okay, I need to bring this together and make this a stronger message for this one person I'm talking to. It's important to be able to expose how valuable we can be, and a big part of that is how we communicate it. Absolutely. And brand yourself. Yes, Anjali, absolutely brand yourself. Goals of a personal narrative. Listener to like and remember you. It's the first impression. Very good, Gina. And for those of you who might be on that have had long careers, some of you might be starting your careers, one thing I want to tell you is that I teach a lot of corporate education in addition to my coaching, a lot of corporate leadership programs. And working on your PVP and working on your introduction is something that you will do throughout your entire career. Because as you gain more experience, as you gain more skills, as you take another Udacity course, you're adding value and you're adding more to your story. So never stop working on this. And as you go through this little exercise that we're going to walk through today, hopefully it'll just be the start of something that you continue throughout your career, and to constantly be tweaking and adding different skills and talking more about your value. Zia says, I want to define myself in 1 to 2 minutes, and I want to keep the listener to get interested and start a conversation. Very good. When someone just walks you through their resume year by year, and you just start to, as an interviewer, you just start to get so bored, right? What's going to spark their interest? What's going to get them really interested in you? Not what you did in 2002, right? It's going to be what you've been doing recently. What work relates to what you've done. Now, maybe there was something in 2002 that was really exciting that you're going to touch on, but we don't want to go through all those years and all that step by step. We're going to give you a much more engaging, exciting way to give your PVP. Okay. I'm going to get ready. I'm going to answer one more comment here. It says, what if you think your pop is great, but it isn't? How do you know your pop is good? Oh, PVP, I think it was instead of pop. I was thinking make your message pop. Well, I think one of the most important things to do is have someone check it. Have a career coach look at it. Have a friend look at it. Have a colleague look at it. And everyone has value. Everyone has something to give. Everyone has a story. It's just finding the right pieces that you want to bring out in different conversations. I like this quote that I saw in a Harvard Business Review article. The foundation for everything in a job search and career progression, it's targeting potential employers, attracting the help of others, and explaining why you're the one to pick. So think about that. Again, it's something that you're going to work on throughout your entire career, that personal value proposition. It's the foundation for everything in that job search and everything in your career progression. I work with people who are trying to move up within their current company, trying to figure out how to do it, how to move around, how do they, and developing that personal value proposition, expressing it, showing it, marketing it is really, really important. So kudos to all of you who are here today and working on your personal value proposition. Gina says, have a unique talent or experiences that is immediately memorable, even if it's not tech-based. That's great, Gina. And I think that, you know, that's a really good thing too. If you know who you're going to interview with and you do a little research on them, maybe you see, oh, I realize we both went to the same university, or we both lived in China at the same time, or we both took the same Udacity course. Whatever you can find is that little link that could maybe connect you or make it memorable is really good. So again, let's think about why you need it. And a lot of you came up with, I think, most of these. So I think we're all on the same track here. But just to clarify, it helps you get really clear with your goals. When you see your personal value proposition, when you read it, you believe it, you know it. And it also might make you think, you know what? I think it's pretty good, but what I really need is, I feel like I need an extra skill in here. I want to really get this extra experience. It helps you see where your gaps are also, and it helps you elevate and push yourself. It helps you articulate your message with confidence. And like someone said earlier, helps you make that great first impression. And at the end of the day, it really creates the image that you want everyone else to have of you. Remember, perception is reality. You want to make sure that the image you're projecting, the way you're packaging yourself up and you're tying that bow on top, is exactly the way you want people to see it and what you want them to see in you. So you see the lady looking in the mirror and she's thinking, I know what I see, but what do others see? What's that reflection back that I see and I want others to see? And thinking about your PVP as how you want others to perceive you, whether it's in an interview or at a networking event, keeping a consistent image is really important. So if everyone wants to, if you want to take some notes here, we're going to talk about establishing your personal value proposition. And really, we're going to help you walk through an exercise that can get you started on writing this. And we're going to look at your attributes and your aspirations, because essentially your PVP will include both of those. It needs to include what those attributes are, what those skills are. And we'll go through and look at some questions you can ask yourself and where to take some notes to help you think about it. And I know, because a lot of people think my attributes, oh, I'm a data analyst, that's my attribute. But there's so much more to it. So hopefully these questions that we go through will help prompt your thinking and help you think, oh yes, I've done this in my work. I forgot I took that extra class. Oh, that's right. There was a project I worked on where I got exposed to some new technology. So as we go through, take some notes, write it down, start thinking about the things you want to include in your personal value proposition. So your attributes. What value do I bring to my job? If you thought, you know, what would my boss say? What would my manager say? Or what would my colleagues say is the value I bring into a project? If you were putting a project together, a project team, why would you have yourself on the team? What are you good at? Really believe in yourself and believe, like, what value am I bringing to this project? The next, think about, what do you love about the work you do? That's where that passion comes out. That's where that excitement comes out when you're introducing yourself. Think about the parts of the job that you love. We all have parts of our job that we don't love, right? When you have that to-do list in the day and there's the things that always hit the bottom and never get crossed out, always maybe to the very end of the deadline that you've set. So think about what you love. What are those things you like to do first when you wake up? What are those things you get excited about going to the office to do? Then think about what keywords and phrases best describe how I'm known. Do people say I'm meticulous? I have a good attention to detail. Do they say I'm very quick at programming? Do they say I'm very thorough? Do they say I present very well? Think about if you've had a performance review with a manager. What are some of those key words and phrases that you heard that you would believe your manager would say about you? And again, at the bottom there, what skills and expertise underscore my value? I've talked to people, a lot of Udacity students who have just a huge bank, I would say, of technical skills. And some of those, they almost forget, some of you sometimes forget how amazing that really is, and how having that depth of experience or that breadth of experience really gives strength to your profile. And even if there are certain skills that are maybe a little outdated, but you used for a long time. You got used to troubleshooting, managing projects, and then you've started working in a new technology. That shows your depth, that shows your experience. And as you think about these questions and ask yourself these questions, and hopefully you're writing things down now and thinking about it, think also about soft skills and hard skills, right? Your technical skills are your programming skills, those skills that you work so hard to build up and become an expert at. But also think about soft skills. Are you a good collaborator? Are you a good project manager? Are you a good presenter? Are you a good writer? Like, what are things that how you communicate or how you work well with others? How does that help? I was just working with someone today talking a lot about working with multicultural teams. That's a skill, that's a talent, that's a value you bring. If you've worked in diverse teams or if you've proven yourself to work remotely, those are all different skills and values that you have. The easy one there, what are my biggest strengths? Very general question that often comes up in the interview. So think about that. Really think about what your strengths are. And I always say to people, as you go through your PVP and create it, I want your first draft to be like, let your ego be huge. Believe in yourself. Like, write it as if, it was going to get you that dream job you needed. What you put on paper for yourself as your PVP should be your biggest ego, should be your biggest confidence builder. Now you're going to take that and you're going to tweak it and massage it a little to fit LinkedIn or to fit a cover letter or to fit that discussion in an interview. But before you can customize it and scale it down, you need to have the real big picture, the whole picture. I know some people, their personal value proposition is a whole page. They've written out almost like a letter to their dream job, their dream company. And that's one way you can think about it. The last two questions here to think about: what makes me unique? What really makes me special? And what do I do that is fantastic in my job? And think about, if someone was going to hire you, what would be that one thing you do each day that you say, you know what, this is what you're going to love about me? I'm going to stop here for a second. Those are the kind of the questions I want you to think about as you think about your attributes to help you build your confidence, to remember it's okay to be egotistical here, and to think about all those different things you bring to that package, to the table. Leonie asks, should you adjust these attributes based on the company you're approaching? Absolutely. I think, and that's why it is important to have this big picture and have it all mapped out, whether you have it in a letter form. Some people put it in almost a diagram form where they branch off and show their different strengths so that they can visualize it, however that works for you. And I think as you go into a company that you're going to interview for, look through the job description, look at those company values, what they value as a whole, and then look at your PVP and think, okay, what aligns here? What really aligns? And it's also a good litmus test to say, you know what, if nothing aligns into those company values and what I do and what I bring and what I want in a job, then that helps you also filter out what you want to do and what the companies you're really interested in and the jobs. Someone asked, what was the category before my attributes? It's going to be next. We haven't hit it yet. So first it was my attributes, and next it will be aspirations. Any questions here about the attributes as you think about these? I know for younger people it can feel harder because you think, wow, I just finished school. I don't have that much of a PVP yet. But you do. Think about things the way you operate in a group project, how you've worked with people on teams and projects, and use those examples. Use those as your inspiration. And you'll find pretty quickly after your first job in 6 months, this PVP is really going to change. Leonie says, PVP will help and see if you're a good cultural fit. Absolutely. I was working with someone recently, and it looks like she's going to have to change jobs. Her company's getting sold. And in her current job, she has great flexibility. She can work remote when she needs to. And those are very, very high priorities for her in her life right now. She's proven herself as a very strong remote worker, very reliable. She's gone into interview with another company, and they're very strict on what time you need to be there and being at the office every day. And it just, from a personal value proposition, what she can bring and what she also values does not align. And it's really important to see that. Bulla asks, where does my PVP go? Bulla, your PVP is going to be, when you first create it, it is yours. It is yours to hold on to see your vision, to create your mission. Then you're going to use that as your foundation for all of those things you have there, your CV, your resume, your cover letter, your interview, your networking. So think about it as if you were, let's just use what's a big company we all know. Let's say it's Apple. And Apple has their value proposition. And they've got their mission statement, their values, and then they've got all these different areas where they target it, right? They target it on how they project their image in their marketing and in their products. And that's the same for our own personal value proposition. Where do we sell ourselves, and keeping that consistent message. Now, again, it's going to be tailored for each one. You're going to bring out different experiences or different skills. You're not changing who you are. You've got this nice big picture. You just tweak it and highlight different things at different times. Any more questions about attributes before we move on? All right. Okay, now we want to think about aspirations. And the reason we talk about aspirations is because if we just have our personal value proposition there and it feels very static, then it's not going to help motivate us in our goals and our where we want to go next in interviews. So think about asking yourself these questions. Where do I want to go next? Where do I see myself in 1 year, 5 years, 3 years, 10 years? And what goals have I set to get there? And, you know, some of these, they seem like very simple questions, but they can actually be the hardest because they haven't happened yet, right? It's where you can dream a little. It's where you can branch it out a little. And again, remember, your personal value proposition is about you also building that confidence in yourself, building your own professional profile to make sure you're collating and keeping all that data, let's call it, a lot of you are data people, about what you've done, and look at how that's going to lead into what you want to do next. Also, when you see what you want to do next and where you've been, that's also where we find gaps, right? That's why maybe a lot of you are taking a Udacity course right now. You identified at some point that maybe there was a gap you had or a skill that you needed to be able to go to where you want to go next. All right, a little bit more on aspirations. Get specific. Think about what title or position do I really want? Do you want to be a team leader, a director? And do you see yourself leading an IT team? Do you see yourself going out and having your own business someday? Now, again, so there's certain things you won't say in an interview, but knowing these and having these in your personal value proposition and setting your goals is really important to helping you project the right image. Think about, what increased responsibilities do I want? Have you gotten to the point in your job where maybe you feel like you're not growing or learning anymore? You're not being challenged. Maybe you're busy, it's filling your day, but you're not learning anything new. You're not getting into new territory. Start identifying, okay, if at some point I can work in this current position or grow a little, what do I really want to do? What are those new responsibilities I would want? And hopefully some of those others would go away. And next, and this is where your Udacity course really comes into play, is what new skills am I working on that I'd like to use in my next job? So I know there's a lot of you that I talk to that are, let's say you're a software engineer right now, and you're taking these data science classes because you want to shift more into data science. Those are those new skills that you want to make sure you bring out in your PPP and in your tell me about yourself, to make sure that they don't just see you as your history, but they see you as what you've been working on, what you, maybe you aren't as experienced in data science, obviously, as software engineering, but you're starting to make that transition. You're starting to get those experience. You want to use those skills. Someone also texted, like, as you plan, let me just read this a second, planned my intro, my story, but so how, when you get on the call, do you make sure you don't forget these things? And maybe I'll touch just really quick on, as you create your PPP, then for every interview, you're going to want to rewrite it, tweak it to be what you want to say. I don't recommend memorizing it, but I do recommend writing it out, thinking about, again, remember, first 90 seconds, first impressions, you're setting the tone, you're creating this environment for the whole interview. So working on that, structuring it, and if you have a piece of paper with it printed out, bullet pointed, your order, or highlight some of the words you want to make sure you touch on, that's a great way to help get you started very confidently. So hopefully you've been taking some notes already and thinking about creating your PPP. As you look at this little worksheet, try to think about those top 5. And again, there's a few different ways to help you get organized. This is one way, writing down your top 5 attributes, top 5 aspirations, start looking at that and how it aligns. Another way, some people like to find the dream job, imagine it. Hopefully you have a real job description that makes it even better if you have a certain company you're targeting, and write a pretend cover letter to that company and write your PVP in that mindset. That helps some people. Other people like to, again, do more like a mind map, where you've got yourself in the center and you've got your technical skills out this way, maybe some project management skills this way, soft skills here, new skills developing over here. However you like to visualize it and see it to get started is great. Then I do recommend, again, writing it out, see it yourself. If you looked in my computer right now, from the last time I moved and was looking for new ways to grow my business, I probably have 6 different versions of introducing myself in different conversations where I was either networking or formally interviewing with someone. Because I would want to bring out certain experiences, certain skills that I think would be most relevant to them. Remember, anytime you present, it's what does my audience need and want to know. It's not what I want to talk about. It's not what I feel like talking about from, again, 2002. I had one great experience and I just want to talk about that. If it's not relevant to that person I'm interviewing, that audience, then I'm not going to make that connection. Another person says, are there any tools you can recommend to help you identify your attributes and aspirations? I think that one thing that is helpful, you know, these tools, these questions, going through these questions, asking yourself is really the first step. Another way that you can think about it is an exercise that I go through with a lot of people is, so if you've identified your top 5 attributes, your top 5 aspirations, then think about what are my top 5 stories, projects, experiences. If someone came to me today and said, I want to hire you, but I want to hear your top 5 best experiences. Where did you learn the most? Where did you feel you grew the most? And write those out. Was it a certain class you took? Was it a big project you worked on in another country? Was it a remote freelance work that you did? And write those out and think about you know, a couple bullet points on each one, and then ask yourself, what was my biggest learning outcome from that project? Another thing to ask yourself is, okay, so let's say you've been on a 6-month project and you finished that 6-month project and someone said to you, why are you better today than you were 6 months earlier? think about that and think about, wow, like, what have I done in these last 6 months? For me personally, I could ask myself, so I've lived back in the States for about 2.5 years. And I could ask myself, okay, what skills have I built? What additional work have I done? What have been my best stories since I've been back that make me way better at what I do today than I was 2.5 years ago? And then you'll start to, things will come to the surface for you. And talk it out. I think talking with a coach, a friend, a colleague, even a manager, and a manager doesn't, obviously, if you're interviewing, there's all those different things, but in your performance reviews, say, you know, what do you think I'm best at? Where do you see me going? Ask some of those questions. See what the people around you see. Because remember, we want to make sure that we're projecting the right image that we want those of us, those around us, and those people who make those decisions to see in us. And as you think about building this PVP and writing this, and we're going to talk about customizing it today, about how we customize it to go into your elevator pitch and that tell me about yourself. But also think about when you, and this will be a whole nother webinar, creating that LinkedIn summary. That helps you, again, you're projecting that image out there to people maybe internally within your company. It elevates you in their mind. When they see, wow, I didn't know Angela was taking all these programming courses and really increasing her skills in this area. By the way, I'm not taking programming classes. I've taken a couple little intro, let's say, hour or two here or there to understand a little bit more of what you all do, but that's about as far as I'll probably go. But ask yourself, like what do I want people to see in me? What do I want out there on LinkedIn, whether it's people internally or externally? All right. So own your story. It is your story. You're writing the narrative. To summarize it, what do I do well? What are those attributes? What do I want to do next? What are my aspirations? And if you're not looking for a job right now, I still recommend putting together a PVP. Starting to think about how you positioning yourself. Maybe it's for that next promotion. Maybe it's to work in a different area of the company. Because if we don't visualize it, if we don't believe it, it's likely to never happen. So let's imagine you've all now had 2 hours to work on your PVP and you've got it ready. It's all written out. It sounds fabulous. Now what the heck do you do with it? Again, it's now become your marketing piece. It's your foundation that you can tailor for your elevator pitch, your self-introduction, cover letters, and LinkedIn summary, and even more. So today we're going to focus on the elevator pitch and the self-introduction. And again, if you didn't hear earlier, we are having a workshop next week where we're actually going to practice this in breakout sessions with your peers. You'll get feedback. You'll hear from others. Another great reason to hear some of your peers and other Udacity students share their self-introduction is you hear ideas that sometimes you think, oh, I forgot, I've done something similar. I should add that in. That's a really great idea. I'm going to go take some notes later and think about how I can adjust mine thinking about that experience. And I know as we get older, I was talking to someone recently and asked if I'd done a certain training program. And I said, no, I haven't really done anything like that. And I think it was my husband looked over at me and said, yes, you did. Remember that one you did last year? So we forget. And so it's good to keep talking about them and hearing others talk. So now the pitch. You're going to use your PVP to create your elevator pitch. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with the term elevator pitch, it is essentially a brief commercial introducing yourself. The term really came from if you were in an elevator with someone for just about 20 seconds, how quickly, if you only had those 20 seconds, what would you tell that person? So that helps you take that big PVP and think, okay, I've got to shrink it down. Because what you say in an elevator pitch, maybe at a networking event, is a lot different than what you're going to say in that self-introduction. And I think that's where people go into an interview not prepared enough because they don't give enough of their story. When someone says, tell me about yourself, I often get I often hear two different things on extremes. In one extreme, it's an elevator pitch. It's too brief, it's too short. It doesn't give me enough information. On the other extreme, for a self-introduction, I get a 5-minute rundown of their entire history and resume, and I get bored out of my mind. So Leonie asks, how long should that pitch be to keep your audience engaged but not bored? A true elevator pitch, and let's say an elevator pitch is, let's target more like you're introducing yourself at a networking event, at work with someone who you just met, you've gotten on a new project with someone. You're not going to give your big egotistical PVP you've got over here in your private stash, right? You're going to give just a really quick highlight. And think again, it could be 10 seconds, it could be 15 seconds. When we switch over to that self-introduction in an interview setting or even a career fair, it's going to be a lot longer. It can be a couple minutes at that point. So I'm going to give you a format for structuring your pitch. Again, I want us to stay away from the old chronological introduction. And this goes for elevator pitch and your self-introduction. Essentially, think of your elevator pitch as this mini introduction, and then you expand on that for your self-introduction. So, present, past, future. I want you to open with the present. Don't start out by saying, well, when I went to college and my university, I want you to just pop in with the present. Give them that most relevant highlight of what you're doing right now. Then touch on the past a little bit. Be selective about what you might mention that you've done in your past. And then highlight the future. I'll give you an example. But remember, as you structure it, present, past, future. So here's the before version. This is the chronological pitch. I completed my bachelor's degree in economics in 2010. I worked as a banking analyst for 5 years. Then I decided I wanted to switch career paths and get a degree in computer science. And then I blah, 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 right? It just bores people. What's better? An engaging pitch. We're going to start with the present. I work as a data analyst for a large insurance company. I work with large data sets to help the business assess insurance claim rates in different states. Prior to this role, I worked as a banking analyst, primarily analyzing bad debt rates in the corporate bank. That's my past. Next, I hope to move into deep learning as I recently completed the deep learning Udacity nano degree. That's my future. So that's a quick little pitch that I might use at a networking event when I've met someone new. I've used that present, past, future format. Remember, intrigue them with your current work. Start with the present, touch on the past, emphasize the future. So what do I say? What's my catch? What's my hook? What will make them want to talk to me? And again, that's where you've created this big personal value proposition. You know what you want to project. Then think about your audience. Who are you going to be talking to? Are you going to an interview where you're introduced with many candidates together? That happens a lot, especially maybe in the consulting or accounting world. And if that happens, you don't give a 10-minute introduction. You give something that's a catch and your hook. Someone said, what's the past for that fresher, someone with no experience? Your past might just be talking a little bit about your education. It might be, after having just recently completed some programming courses, now I'm really ready to move into a blah, blah, blah. So the past might just be a little quicker. Someone with a lot more work experience, they're going to want to highlight those big work experiences, their big draws of why they're being interviewed. Again, know your audience, target your message to that person, and that when you think about your message and that person, Hopefully, anytime you go to an interview, if you make sure you get the person's name, find them on LinkedIn, get a little bit of an overview of who they are so that you can convey your message very targeted to them with a little spin that might help you. And that will help you convey your story with confidence. Someone said, what should be my present if I'm still studying and I'm undergrad? Your present then, can be that you are a student, and that is okay. I'm currently studying this, and that's, it's a lot different for like people who are freshers and coming right out. But maybe you highlight what class you've loved the most, or what made you decide to pick that major, or what it is you love about the current classes you're taking, and why maybe that class has been your inspiration for wanting a job with that company or that particular role. So let's touch a little on beyond the pitch, and this is your self-introduction. And again, this is that big question in the interview. And this is going to be the extended version of your pitch. And let's look at how that looks as we make it a little longer. Because we want to give more detail to the interviewer. We want to sell ourselves a little more. When in the interview, we want to give a lot more information. And again, we want to match specific skills in our background to that specific job that we're interviewing for. So here's a version of that pitch extended. I currently work as a data analyst for a large insurance company. I've been in my role for 3 years, where I work with large data sets to help the business assess insurance claim rates in different states. I perform segmentation and statistical analysis using Python and R. I'm also starting to apply deep learning techniques learned in my recent coursework at Udacity. That's my present. Prior to this role, I worked as a banking analyst for 5 years, primarily analyzing bad debt rates in the corporate bank. In my next role, I hope to continue growing in the data science field and take on more responsibilities into deep learning. I think my advanced data science and deep learning skills will allow me to jump quickly into this senior data analyst role. That's my future. So again, these are all going to be so different. And this, I would say, is still a little bit short. They'd probably add a little bit more of the past experience if they've had 5 years of work experience. But for the sake of fitting on a slide for you today, I think it gets to the point where the order that we're going in and what we really want to focus on. So we're going to summarize here. You're going to set the narrative and the tone. When you have a good prepared personal value proposition, you create that introduction at the beginning of your interview. You're going to create a narrative and set the tone for the rest of the interview. You really have that influence in the interview process, because the interviewer comes in with so many questions they want to ask, but they also come in with, hey, I want to hear what this person has to say. And remember, it is the foundation for your job search and career progression. It looks like today we don't have time for breakout sessions. I think that it was probably a little more useful to think about preparing this first. And I think what we'll do is come back together, open it up now for questions for a few more minutes. I want to give you as much input and advice as I can so you can leave today being able to say, you know what, I'm going to go write my personal value proposition and I'm going to feel really good about it. I also recommend, again, meeting with a coach, a friend, a colleague, a manager to practice maybe your elevator pitch or your self-introduction, whatever the situation might be for you, with your LinkedIn profile, tailoring that summary. And I think Brett will be doing some LinkedIn webinars soon. And again, we're going to have practice on June 12th, where we will get into all these breakout rooms. If you haven't attended yet an interview workshop, they are only about 10 minutes of me talking. So you don't have to listen to me for so long. It's only about 10 to 15 minutes of me talking, and the rest we're in breakout rooms practicing. So I really encourage all of you, and hopefully we have even more participants, but And if you're watching this recorded, of course you can still come. Anyone can come. But I think if you've gone through this webinar, you're going to feel a lot more prepared to create that pitch, create your PVP, and work on that tell me about yourself answer. Get ready to do that in practice, and you're going to hear others. They're going to hear you. You're going to get feedback, and you're going to feel a lot more confident going into that next interview. PVP is your personal value proposition. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm just going to make my chat here a little bigger so I can see all the comments coming in. Someone said, how can I answer? How do you rate yourself in X skill or technologies? That is a really good question. And I think that's a tough question to get in an interview also. And obviously there's different ways to look at it. I always recommend creating your own scale. So let's say you ask me, Angela, how are your, and let's pretend I'm not really me. I'm a super tech person. Angela, how would you rate your skills in Excel? And I might say, well, let's just say on a scale of 1 to 5, if 1 is someone who, my great grandmother who never saw Excel, and 5 is a, let's say a financial analyst that's been working in Excel for 30 years. And I kind of make up my own scale. I consider myself about a 4. So try to build your own scale and think about where you might put yourself. If it's something that you're really progressing in, but you're not as strong as you'd like to be, then maybe I'd say, you know what? If you had asked me 6 months ago on a scale of 1 to 5, I'd say it probably at that point be a 3, but I'm definitely getting closer to a 4 and a 5 now. So think about how to frame it yourself. Because if you said to me, how do you rate your Python skills? And I just said, oh, I'd give myself a 2. Was that 2 out of 3, a 2 out of 5? So build the scale, give them some visuals there, and then talk about where you are and where you might think you'll be heading. Or maybe, you know what, in my last job, I would have said I was only about a 2 out of 5 in Python, and now I'm definitely up to a 4 and feeling really confident. Someone said, about progression of your career, what should I say if I'm not sure I want to be a team leader in data analysis or go to data science after entry as a data analyst? Okay, so I think that gets a little more personal and specific, and Karina, it's something we could talk about specifically. I think that definitely you want to show that you want to progress, that you want to grow, and thinking about ways that maybe if you're not sure and you could see yourself in either way, you could show your strengths in either. You could say, you know, I love, you know, leading teams, and I could see myself working in data as a senior data analyst and managing a team, but I'm also very intrigued by learning more about data science and could see myself there as well. So maybe that helps. Can you share some ideas or strategies about thinking about the hook? How can we communicate why people would want to talk, or how do we get a hook in? How do we get people to talk to us more? One, you know, think about the interesting story you have. If you're at a networking event, it doesn't have to be something specifically about you. It could be something about the person who's going to speak, or you just heard speak, something about the topic of where you are. If it's at an interview and you're trying to really intrigue their interest, tying something you've done maybe to the company, or maybe you know someone that works at the company and you bring that up, and try to just, again, get away from that chronological introduction and think about it as, hey, I'm interviewing for this person. Could be a new friend, it could be a new colleague. What do I want them to know about me? How do I really get them interested? And again, looking at their LinkedIn, seeing what they've done, looking at their experience helps you assess kind of who they are and how you might target to them. Someone says, how far in the past do you need to go with your self-introduction? You don't want to talk about what you did 10 years ago. It's not relevant anymore. I think that, think about, I know for myself personally, what I do is I kind of think of my like early finance career as kind of this one general bucket where maybe when it was more recent, I would go through each job that I worked at a bank and what I did, the type of financing I worked on. Where now I kind of bucket it as just saying, I had an early career in finance, which helped me really understand banking and finance and my financial analyst skills, blah, blah. And that's about it, right? It's 3 seconds on started out in finance and kind of like bucket that together and then focus on the more relevant work you've done that you want them to hear more about. Okay, we've got a few more questions and then we do have to stop. So I'm going to finish these 3 that are on there. And then again, please come to the workshop next week where we can answer more of these questions as well. So 3 more questions. How can I present my PVP with realistic expectation when I want to join the company with full intention to be the interviewer's boss or higher over time? That's a good question. Yeah, because you don't want the, and I know there was a big conversation on Slack recently about what do you do when you're more experienced than the manager? A great leader wants to hire great people and isn't going to be bothered by that. A boss wouldn't want to hear it. So it is something very touchy to talk about. And I think that to show that you're eager to learn, you want to grow, you have aspirations, but maybe not going into being, getting specific with titles or talking about being more general, where I'd like to grow with the company, I'd like to grow my career here. A little more terminology like that can show you as more of a team player. What if I am really low on the scale and the technical skills and I'm asked how you rate yourself? Okay, so this is a good question too. I think that, so let's say someone did ask me about my Python skills. What I might say is, if they said, Angela, how do you rate yourself in Python? I might say, well, Python specifically, I wouldn't put myself like very high on the scale. However, I have worked a lot with R and I'm very confident by, I'm 1 out of 5. I'm definitely a 5 in R. And I know from what I've seen with Python so far that it's something I can, would be really excited. I'm excited to learn and start working on. So that's one way you could bridge it. If it's an area that you don't even want to work in and you have no desire, just be honest and say, in terms of Python, that is not an area where I've concentrated. I've spent more of my time working on, data engineering and something over here that you can try to switch the focus and get their interest on something else where you do have a strength. Last question, what should I want to know? Let's see, what should I want to know? Ask an interview about a company when applying to position in it. So I think I like to break this into a few different areas. So as you think about, and I'm kind of thinking about at the end of the interview and they say, what questions do you have for us? And thinking about the questions in different buckets. And you've got questions about the job, questions about, and that's like very specific to that role, questions about the company overall, and then maybe questions to the specific team or department. And when you kind of break it into those 3 buckets, it gets pretty easy to think about the questions you really want to know, things you want to ask. And I know when I've done career sessions with people, we've talked about I've shared with them some questions to lead in with, to start with. And that's something we can work on together. And it's a resource that, I recommend going in with those questions, have them all written down. So you think you have them in your mind, but hopefully during the interview, if it gets conversational, you're asking questions that are very natural and come up through the process. If you don't, then reverting back to those questions. And always think about it, especially if many of you are making career pivots, career changes, think about if you're going to make that move, what kind of company do you want to be with? What are you looking for? So that you're targeting hopefully the right job to interview with to begin with, and that you're really excited going in and you're just trying to learn more and you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. That takes a little stress off and helps you approach it a little differently. I do have to end our webinar now. Thank you so much for so many questions, so much engagement. It makes it so much more fun for me. I'm sorry we didn't have a chance to break out, but I feel like we got a lot of information out there, which I hope was really helpful, and a lot of awesome questions. Up there you see the career support email if you need something more from us. Please attend next week, June 12th. I think, Brett, if you have the link that you can share in the chat room so they can go straight to the events page and RSVP now. The interview workshops really are a lot. It is a workshop. It's a lot of practice. It's a lot of less me talking. It's easier for me, harder for you. So I hope you can come and work on these skills and work on those PVPs and share them with us, and share with the people who didn't attend this one how much work you've done. Thank you all. Thanks so much. And we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Thank you. And Brett has put the link in. If you forget where the link in, if you go to the Udacity page and look for events, you should find it. Or send one of us a message on Slack or the Student Hub and we can get it to you. Okay. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.